Good day, everybody. Welcome back to the Health Shoppe Niagara. This is our 5th episode. I want to take all the people that took the time to watch the episodes that we had going on. Very great information and feedback from questions and concerns and comments. And I'm glad you guys enjoy it. And we're going to continue on with what we've been talking about. Introduce Steph again, my co-partner, team player.
Thank you. Yep, Stephanie Jackson here, integrative health practitioner, and excited to be back for another episode 5. And what are we talking about today?
Yeah, just to recap the last episode, we had Josh here from
Right.
Baden Canine. Great conversation. He works with a lot of interesting people, a lot of veterans, a lot of first responders, people with any type of mental health. We're going to continue on with mental health, but we wanted to rename it. We thought that not rename it for our sake, is that when you speak mental health, you're talking about a different level or a different, maybe there's a stigma attached to it. So what we decided to call, what do we want to call it?
Well, I think, what are we really looking at? We're not, what is mental health? What is mental illness? There's a lot of stigma attached to it. So I think we're speaking about the brain, really, is what we're speaking about, and what is the organ in the human body that we're addressing today, which is brain health. Because I remember growing up, I don't know about you, but it was always labeled as, this special, separating us. And I think we've done that over the course of history, is segregating and isolating people that have an illness, a mental illness. So if we really kind of take that stigma off and call it brain health, and really go into this topic with that perspective of looking at the objective science and the organ itself, and how do we start to begin to look at, how does brain issues, broken brain, come about, right?
Because we always deal with the broken body. I have this ache pain, I have this going on. They physically diagnose, you got heart problems, or maybe you have some sort of other ailment going on in your body. But one of the interesting questions I had from the last episode in my feedback was somebody messaged me and wanted to know, is there an actual physical diagnosis, an imaging or a diagnostic imaging or something that they can do to test to see what's going on inside my brain? And I thought that was a very interesting question, because I couldn't really answer that question as far as I've been taught. We really don't touch into the things that we're going to touch in today. We talked about recognizing unhealthy brain, I guess, if we want to change the term, an unhealthy brain, and how to reach out and how to cope with different modalities, different tools that are out there. But today, like I said, we wanted to talk more. And Steph, do you know of is there a diagnostic?
Well, number one, I have to kind of take a few steps back, as I'm not allowed to treat, diagnose, or cure illness. So I am not diagnosing here on the show mental illness.
Yeah, we're
and
not.
I can't even use really the word treatment. And so when we talk about different modalities on how do we kind of rebalance brain health, is that we've got to look at rebalancing the body and look at different protocols that can help with that. So number one, functional medicine, integrative health, we always look at the root cause. So I want to take us there first.
Sure, let's go.
Really kind of diving into what is that root cause. So there's some type of illness or injury, whether it be a physical injury. So we can all relate to, growing up, playing sports, falling.
Like a concussion?
Yeah, I mean, I skied. Helmets were not a fashion statement in the 80s, skiing downhill, right? Now they are. It's like you're uncool if you're not wearing a helmet. But the equestrian world, we wear helmets, but I don't know how many times I've fallen on my head, been kicked in the head by a horse, trampled, all of that. So there is that acute injury, car accidents, traumatic brain injury, right? So there's that. And I'm going to show some different brain scans that we can actually look at the organ. And I think mental health conventionally is the only stream of medicine that doesn't actually look at the organ that it's treating.
So it doesn't diagnose it?
So we're not
Not diagnose it, but doesn't do any imaging or...
Right, imaging, testing. I'm going to go into functional medicine lab testing, and really kind of looking at that organ to see what are the biochemical imbalances and also the physical broken brain.
But you mentioned some sort of physical, like either concussion or some
Right,
sort of.
right.
Is there anything that maybe a person hasn't suffered any of this? Is there any other root
So
causes
that's that exactly. That's the physical side of things, but then there's also a mental, emotional, situational trauma situation that can happen. So we can look at this past, present of some type of abuse, neglect, emotional torment, physical, sexual abuse. This can happen through childhood, or it could be something later on in adult life, in present life. You know, being a front lines responder. We had Josh on the show last time speaking about PTSD. So your line of work presents these traumatic situations where you have now an injury in your brain.
And you talk going back to Josh, and he deals with a lot of people that are ex-SEALs or ex-military that are just tough people, and then for them to to experience something traumatic that lead to an unhealthy brain, it shows you that you could be the strongest person in the world, and if something's off, you eventually your tank will overflow. Eventually, you'll start to show some signs of an unhealthy brain, I guess you could say.
So I think the point we can relate this back to is there's some type of physical, emotional, mental trauma that happens, whether it be from childhood to present day to something that has caused some level of injury, right? So, I mean, there's a doctor that I want to reference who works out, he's very unconventional, Dr. Gabor Mate, and he was one of the first I remember reading his stuff when I wasn't even working in this field at all, and he works with the severely mentally challenged, substance abuse, Vancouver, downtown east side, and I always kind of wondered, like, how do you get to that point with mental health of
Where
like
you're
living on the streets, addicted, and you're just like at that bottom level of society. And I mean, you see that too as a first responder because you're responding to a lot of that, group of people.
It always makes you like, how did you end up in
Like,
this
how do you
situation?
get there, right? That question of why and finding the meaning in it and trying to understand it, right? And he relates mostly all the cases that he works with it relates back to some type of childhood trauma, and it gets to that point. So, I mean, let's look at some of these brain scans, because substance abuse too, we might be thinking that we're doing like relieving the pain by turning to substance, alcohol, smoking, marijuana, food, sugar, bad diet, all of this kind of stuff. But what is that doing to the actual biology of our brain? So we can look at some brain scans here. So first of all, if we go back to like the physical injury, here we have a healthy brain. And these are brain scans done by Dr. Amen in the Amen Clinic. He's in the United States. So this is like one way of actually looking at the organ. So here we have a traumatic brain injury, and you can see like this big
inflammation,
this dent, something like it's just showing that. Then I want to look at substance. So I know we had this conversation earlier about moderation, and I'm like, I don't believe in moderation, right? So when we're talking about substance and
so when you mean moderation, is like I'll have a glass of wine, or I'll have a beer today. It's only one beer. Tomorrow I come home from work, I had another. Maybe just need to unwind, so I'll have another glass of wine tomorrow. So that moderation turns into from moderation to more than moderation.
And I hate stepping on other practitioners' toes, but I kind of do it just naturally. Where I hear this like, oh, like that glass of wine a day, it's good for you. Whereas, okay, it might be relieving some stress. It might be, making you feel better. But what are the long-term effects? So this is an example of moderation. So a brain scan of that 2 to 4 glasses of alcohol or wine a day, healthy brain, a moderate drinker. So you can see it looks like these dents, this golf balls type indentations, where it's actually, this is what I always say, it's short-term pleasure, long-term pain. So what is that accumulation? If we're hitting our system every day, that's moderation. Whereas maybe one day a week or once a month, then I'll have my 4 glasses of wine. have a good time, have a nice, a big pizza, a big cheat meal, flex meal, whatever you want to call it. And it's like one time I'm hitting my system, where then I'm giving my system a break to heal, to rebalance the other 6 days of the week. So that's how you can frame, again, with perspective, as what is moderation in terms of like substance and food. A little bit every day, your body doesn't have time to rebalance itself.
Especially if you're prone to that illness, right?
And then we can take it up a notch of like getting into some harder substance, and this just shows some different brain scans of, what different drugs and the age of these brains. So you have the top scan so we take
we forgot to
body,
introduce
Brenda the Body.
Brenda the Body.
So you have the top part of the brain here. So we're doing this scan. So over here, we've got 3 years of meth, a 28-year-old, a 45-year-old that has done 10 years of alcohol abuse, cocaine, and then these scans here are the underneath part of the brain. And it just shows like 4 years of marijuana, 4 years of smoking. So all these things, it's that short-term pain or short-term pleasure, long-term pain, right? So that's one tool of looking at the body in terms of, I guess, diagnostic. Looking at it in that respect. Now, these brain scans are really expensive, so not everybody has that budget. Maybe if you are in sports or the NHL, you're getting, there's more discussion around that type of injury or car accidents and stuff like that, where you're getting these brain scans done. But if somebody's complaining of mental illness again, are we scanning their brain?
Not really.
We're not. We're not.
Until you repeatedly, it'll take you probably 6 months to a year to actually get to that point where you're going to have your brain scanned.
So more practically and more realistic, what I do in my practice is I run something called the organic acids test, which is another test to look at the biochemistry
and
the
that blood
biology.
Work or is that urine?
It's a urine-based sample, and we look at the waste markers from the day before, and it gives us 75 biomarkers of what is going on in the human body in terms of neurotransmitters, digestive health, toxicity. And that's what I want to look at, is what are all these things? What is the level of serotonin, dopamine, the ratios? There's some key ratios. So, for example, if somebody's ratio of norepinephrine to dopamine is very high, that means that this body, the mind, can't keep up. The body can't keep up with the mind. Is there some type of stress going on, and the body just can't keep up? So that's one key ratio that we can see right on that test, and then we have plans for that person to rebalance their health. Another key marker is looking at the neurotoxins on this test. So something called quinolinic acid, you can look it up, where this is a neurotoxin. We never want to see this high. This is high in people that have neurological diagnosed disease.
Again, urine or blood work?
It's through the
urine
test. So in conventional medicine, you have this spectrum of in-range normal, where you're healthy, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you. Even though you have like all these complaints, there's nothing diagnostically wrong with you. You go over here, you have a diagnosis. So in functional medicine, we can look at these lab tests and rebalance before you get over to that point of, here's your diagnosis, here's your label.
Similar like a thyroid test. We don't diagnose thyroid or the end until it's at a certain level, but naturopaths and functional medicine diagnose it on the stages before it becomes full blown. Exactly like this case right here. You brought up an interesting urine. It's in the elderly. People that suffer, especially females, that have a UTI, how it affects the brain. So the chemistry, you're having an infection in your body that, besides the painful urination and everything else that comes with the UTI, how the confusion can start in the brain of an elderly person that has a UTI. So
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point when you bring up infection in the body. So it's basically the brain and the endocrine system are working together. That's why it's like functional medicine looks at the whole systems of how they're all interplaying together. So you have something like the endocrine system. So when I look at the cortisol curve, the hormone test, which is another combination of saliva and a bit of blood, and we can look at that curve, and if there are spikes during the day of cortisol, that's kind of hinting that there's some type of underlying infection. So we don't want to like right away throw supplements at the problem, is we want to actually figure out, we don't want to suppress the cortisol just yet by, oh, here's your protocol, is we want to actually find out. A lot of people have these like dental work, root canals, 15 years old, where there's some type of underlying, they might be non-symptomatic. There is some type of inner infection going on that is causing that, again, that stress response. So cortisol is up for a reason.
So the confusion or the unhealthy brain
Confusion.
is a secondary. It's not your primary, it's your secondary.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
See how we look at that whole picture. So going back to the quinolinic acid as it being a neurotoxin, there's other neurotoxins that we can look at. Something so everyday, such as with tap water. And I don't think Niagara region puts fluoride in the water,
I'm not
but
sure.
Toronto does. So I mean, I was in 10 years in Toronto drinking the tap water, putting that fluoride, those little micro amounts of
I was drinking well water that
neurotoxins.
tasted like sulfur. It was probably more healthier than the water that tasted good.
So it's an example of this environmental exposure. Heavy metals in the system too is something that I test through hair tissue mineral analysis. So looking at what are levels of heavy metals, and those are toxic to the brain.
So to kind of step back then, people that are been diagnosed with an unhealthy brain go along, something's wrong with them. Maybe they don't seek the right course of action that we're talking about right here, preventative. They go to their MD, and then next thing you know, you're labeled with mental health, and now it's back into the pharmaceuticals,
Right.
back into, you've already hit that stage where you maybe doing it the way you're talking about and doing it more functional medicine wise, you could have prevented that last step. Not saying you're going to cure it, but maybe helping you cope better with reaching that end all be all.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at some of these brain scans and the work of Dr. Amen, and he's got some books coming out called The End of Mental Illness. And you can see the progress, where you think like, oh, the brain injury is non-reversible. Well, there actually is. It's not a quick fix. It's not the 90-day protocol. It's the 720-day protocol.
It becomes
right?
a very a lifestyle. Everything in life is a lifestyle, but this becomes, you want to change it. It's a very strict, very regimented lifestyle. I guess you have to venture on.
There is a path of recovery. Absolutely, there is progress that we can see through the science. So one topic that, when you ask about like kind of the conventional, so you have children, we're seeing more and more of ADD, ADHD, autism, right?
Huge.
The organic acids test is the test to run. It really is, because there's this gut-brain connection. Like, I want to say 190 to 100% is a kid with autism, their gut microbiome is upside down, out of balance.
It's weird how that happens at such an early age, that their gut inflammation can be so out of whack.
Absolutely. So there's a huge rebalancing factor in the other systems that, conventional doesn't hit at all. They're not looking at nutrition. They're not looking at lifestyle so much. They're not running these lab tests to see what are the levels of small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, candida, parasites. All of this has an impact up here.
So what should, for the viewers out there that are tuning in and watching this, what would you suggest to them if they just finished watching our episode, they have something, an underlying condition, they approach their MD, what kind of questions can they pose to the MD to kind of do the right tests and
Right. Well, number one is the MD doesn't have this kind of training. They're not trained in high level nutrition and
so they're more
supplements.
reactive than proactive?
It's they're looking at it from a diagnostic perspective. So if you want a different answer, you've got to go ask a different person. You've got to go into more of the functional medicine. You've got to, like, that's why I'm referencing Dr. Gabor Mate, Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Amen. Like, just look, these people are way smarter than me. They've been doing this way longer than I have.
Oh, you're pretty smart.
Right? But that's who I learn from.
Yeah.
So it's like, who am I learning from? Go learn from them. What can people do is, they can set up a consultation to fill out an intake, is where a practitioner like myself, I'm going to listen to the actual story. Is if testing is not in the budget, we look at the big picture story. We do surveys. Did you know there's 7 different brain types?
No, I didn't.
So there's these kind of questionnaires that I will give someone to say it's like a personality quiz, but for your brain type. So if I'm going to align a certain treatment, well, I can't even use the word treatment, right? A rebalancing protocol to help you rebalance your body, is I want to know, what is that brain type? I'm a type 2. So that means I have a bit of a lazy frontal lobe.
Really?
I have lower dopamine and I've confirmed this in my own personal lab tests, is I do have a little bit lower dopamine. So I need something that is going to increase those levels of dopamine. I do really well with structured goals, the SMART goals, because every time I hit a goal, I get that spike of dopamine in my head.
A rush,
right? Higher intensity exercise is good for me. What else? Eating a nutrition plan, not obviously to some people, that is removing a lot of the toxins from my nutrition, so it's very anti-inflammatory, but it's higher in protein, so I'm getting enough protein. That, again, is something, whereas some people, if they have too much protein or too much fat, it actually makes them angry.
So how would you determine what diet is good for my brain, what activities are good for my brain? It's such a huge mystery out there. So
it's not, it is a mystery, but if you just start to dial in, where it's like you do the questionnaires, you do the lab tests, you can start to piece together the story of how we rebalance your body.
So then, going back to somebody seeking help when it's full blown, these are some of the courses of action they could have taken and could have prevented them from going and being on the next step that maybe you don't want to be. You're on a psychotic drug or some sort of drug that's playing with the structure and the chemicals in your brain, that it'll take even longer to reverse.
Okay, so before we start talking about drugs, again, that's out of my scope, but we would take that integrative modality approach. So step 1, you do the functional medicine lab testing, you do the questionnaires, you talk about your story, you get that done, an intake. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2 is looking at nutrition and supplements. Then we get into what is the exercise plan, what is the sleep recovery, meditation, and it's those modalities, right? What are some of the emotional stuff also going on? So it's like exploring each one of those avenues as a holistic package. So if we start just quickly with nutrition, we want to go anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, low allergen. I have a 3-day plan. So if people are like, where do I start? Can you do 3 days of
Small
something?
steps.
Of get really dialed in for just 3 days. Because what I'm finding in practice is that it's too much for people to commit to 7 days, to 15 days, to 21 days,
So it's your
to 75.
It's your short-term goals that lead into your long-term goals that lead into a recovery.
You have to tangibly try it on. How does it feel? Just 3 days, right? So it's like, here's your plan for just 3 days where we eliminate some of those allergens, gluten, eggs, dairies, grains, nuts, low tox, chemical food dyes. Just take a break. No alcohol for 3 days.
Then they come back and you reassess them after the 3 days, or not reassess, but
they do. You start to get more sensitive in your own body. So it's like really about trying it on. It's because I find that in practice, it's too monumental. If I say, oh, do this plan for 21 days, 15 days, it's too overwhelming. And it sets the person up for failure. Because like, I don't think I'm going to make it. But 3 days, can you do 1 day?
So what's your typical
right?
response from somebody after 3 days of on being on this regimented system? Do you get back, oh, it's not working, and then
what it is it's the first start of an opt-in. Of like, I'm gonna opt into this healthy, what you're talking about.
Okay.
Right? You get it?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. I'm buying into your.
Are you buying into this right now? So it's trying on, its experience, what it's gonna take. Like, are you willing to give up the things that are making you sick?
And that's a good. Short-term
Right.
goals are better than long-term goals. I mean, for the first 3 days, you might, like I asked you, you might not really. You're opting into a system that's going to make you better, and you have to give it your full-blown effort in order for it to work. And I think that sometimes that's where we fault as.
It kind of goes to that moderation discussion. Is you can't kind of do it in moderation, right? You can, and that's the whole point. Is like, once you rebalance the body, yeah, you can have a day where you go off the rails, but maybe you don't even want to at that point.
No,
because you feel so good, and people just don't know. They have to feel it in their own body of how you can feel good.
So what was your next? We just start off with the program, and then where do you go from there?
So yeah, it's about trying on nutrition. It's about working with some of the supplements, and like everything.
Did you want to talk about some of the
you can't talk
stuff?
about brain health without talking about omega-3. This is one of the key, like, it's so inexpensive. Of like, why not? There's clinical studies that show the rates of omega-3 and depression, anxiety, all of these kind of things. $20 a month. Like, I think you can do that. A good quality omega-3, optimized levels of vitamin D. We want roughly 4,000 IUs a day. And we just, living in Canada, we don't get the vitamin D.
The vitamin D is like the happy feel good supplement.
Yeah, absolutely. Our B vitamins are key. Specifically, B5, B6 are significant for brain health, and B vitamins are the first ones to get depleted when we're drinking, when we're stressed, all of these things. Eating a bad diet, our B vitamins get used up the fastest. So supplementing with a good B. I'm also a fan of melatonin and magnesium.
Sleep.
Again, because we want to get the body into that rest, relaxation, restore.
And it's common, you talk to, not to interrupt you, but you talk to people that are suffering, and like, I didn't sleep at all last night. I slept maybe an hour, or maybe 2 hours, and then you're going through life every day on 2 hours sleep throughout the night, so you really don't get that. You don't really get to recoup. Now, supplementing with the melatonin and the other supplements that you can bring you into that relaxation mode. The dopamine's released in your brain, the melatonin's released in your brain, gives you that opportunity to relax. Maybe you need that extra supplementation to bring you there.
Yeah, and melatonin, there's kind of mixed reviews of people that say, okay, well, again, people say of short-term use, don't get, but again, it's like, this is an antioxidant. It's good for aging. It offsets cortisol. We can test levels of melatonin to see, again, it's related to that cortisol curve.
That's a blood test, right? Or is that urine as well?
The urine test
Urine?
is what I would look at melatonin in that way. When we start to get into more specialized brain supplements, like, we have to also be careful, because a lot of people that I work with, they're on antidepressants and things. So you have to be very careful. So these ones we can kind of recommend in a general way: magnesium, B vitamins, D, omegas. Got to be a little bit careful with omega sometimes. But things like 5-HTP, GABA, all these things can negatively affect in conjunction with pharmaceuticals. So we don't want to just like, oh, here, have these supplements. We have to be very careful, because we can have something called a serotonin toxicity, which is extremely dangerous. Because there's a lot of stuff that we can do, and that's why I really recommend, if you're going to dive deep into this stuff, is really getting in touch with a practitioner that can customize a protocol, right?
You mentioned magnesium is one of the best-selling supplements I have here in the store. People are always taking the magnesium, and it's probably one of the most underutilized supplements, but one of the most beneficial supplements in the store for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, what does it do? It calms. It has a calming effect. It helps loosen up the arteries, get the blood flowing. So as we age, we harden. The body hardens. So magnesium is that counteraction with calcium. Think of calcium as like hardening, and you need the magnesium to balance. So you need that balance. You can have too much magnesium. So if you want to shift that ratio, again, we look at the ratio of cal-mag. Usually people are deficient in magnesium. We're not getting enough from our diet. We're not getting enough from the soils. So yeah, supplementation is popular.
So you mentioned calming. Do these supplements actually calm? Do you find that maybe the brain is overreactive in people that are in an unhealthy brain, that don't have the ability to calm themselves down, don't have the ability to think straight, because there are so many thought processes are going on inside their head? Their brain is working overtime, I guess.
Absolutely. So again, when you look at the different brain types, you can have that anxious, that anxiety. So the person is not able to regulate that anxiety. So whether it's a biochemical aspect, or also, that's where some of the life coaching and counseling does really work, is because people need to shift their perspective. It's like, are you a glass empty kind of person who's looking at the world in a very negative light, who's always thinking like the worst situation?
And that's where you have the extra, like, being able to vent to somebody, being able to talk to somebody about what's bothering you, your problems, is another step in a step of actions that can lead you to better brain health.
Absolutely. So you have those different spectrums. So when we get on the topic of exercise as an example, exercise is a good plan that will boost those healthy brain neurotransmitters. So, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine is going to boost the person, get them more excited, up, yay. Whereas you can have kind of the opposite. If somebody's too anxious, then we've got to kind of look at more of the relax and the calming the nervous system and rest and recovery. Same thing with those TBI and the acute injuries, is that we don't want to create too much stress with a high intense workout regime, right? So
you're adding stress upon stress. Somebody that's high anxiety, high stress, now you're putting him in a workout that's very high stress, like you like the high intensity workouts. Maybe that wouldn't be beneficial to somebody that is suffering. Maybe something like a yoga or something like a calming exercise would be more beneficial to that person.
Yeah, and even if my mind says, yeah, I want to do like the higher intensity, but my body's like, no, and I find like that kind of stuff really boring, is the restorative yoga. Like, it takes more effort for me to do something calm. Meanwhile, my body needs it. Do you know what I mean?
And the one thing about exercise, and I always said this, that I think exercise is so beneficial because it's either that half an hour or the hour that you take out of that day that you just concentrate on yourself, and you have to mentally focus on what you're doing. When you're on a treadmill, um, you got to watch where you're running, or whatever exercise you're participating in, you have to devote that moment into the exercise, so it shuts your brain off. Even if it's for like a split second, it's a moment where you shut your brain off and you're not allowed to think about what's bothering you, and you're able to flush your brain of all the bad stuff that is in your brain.
And that's kind of the last pillar is the sleep recovery meditation. How do you start to begin to teach people how to shut that off?
Well, meditation is huge.
Yeah, and there's tons of studies that show, again, brain scans on the person that meditates versus, like, I don't know, not meditating. But how do you shut that off? What are some tools like binaural beats, brain waves, listening to something that just kind of puts you into a zone? Yeah, breath work. Breath work is huge, right? Is to activate that parasympathetic, that belly breath, that diaphragmic breathing is ways, modalities.
You look at the monks in Japan and China and all that they're such powerful people, they're such mentally strong people, but half of their day or half their life half their day is spent on meditation. So there's a lot to be said about meditation and creating that positive influence in your brain.
Absolutely. So I think as like kind of conclusion to how do we help people that have broken brains or brain injuries or have brain illness, brain struggles, mental health, is that it's a multifactorial approach. Number one, we looking at some of these functional medicine lab testing, get the data on the organ that is not well, get that intake story, get on that nutrition, the supplements that are going to help rebalance the body, the exercise plan that is right. Again, what is your brain type? There's 7 different types.
And the urine test that you said to see where your body could be deficient in.
It's $200. So it's very accessible. It's enough, but it's still accessible as compared to like a brain scan.
Now, could you perform these tests if somebody reached out to us and said,
Absolutely.
I just saw your episode.
I ship these labs around the world, all over North America. It's super easy, user-friendly, and you get enormous data on your health.
So for the viewers out there that are, watching this episode and thinking, that sounds very interesting. Well, Steph just said it. You can reach out to her and she could provide you with the tests, and she can go through the tests with you. Is
Absolutely,
that right?
Yeah. I can put in some comments below the comments on the YouTube video to set up that free consultation if you want to just figure stuff out together. Absolutely. And the second thing is that 3-day plan of like trying it on, because that's that quick win that people can really experience how it feels, health. You got to feel it to want more of it.
And like I said before, I think that that program, the lifestyle, everybody comes in and wants to fix their body, not realizing that by fixing their body, they're actually preventing maybe the struggles they may have going on mentally, certain conditions so you'd be able to fix your body through supplementation, through proper diet, through exercise, through meditation. Encompasses the whole body. You come in here because you want to feel better, but then you start taking supplements, not realizing that, again, like to reiterate myself, it's actually fixing you mentally as well. It's helping with your brain health to have a healthy brain.
Yeah, so it's the biology before the psychology.
Sure.
You can do all the counseling in the world, but if there's biochemical biologies that need to be regulated.
And what was the name of those doctors again, if people want to actually reference those doctors?
Yeah, check out the work of Dr. Amen, Dr. Mark Hyman, as well as Dr. Gabor Mate for some different perspectives on brain health.
Perfect. Anything else you want to add to this?
I think it is a big show. I don't think there's much more to add today. We could go on this topic for a long time.
So we started off, to reiterate, to recap, we started off with Josh coming in our last episode talking about all the good stuff that his facility has to offer through the relieving your stress and anxiety and dealing with PTSD with the aid of a dog, and how the dog releases that calming effect. Today, Steph and I talked about what we can do, or what you can do, or what anybody can do as a course to help prevent it, through the supplementation, through your diet, through exercise, through meditation. Lots of great information coming from you, Steph.
Thank you.
Hopefully the viewers out there take note of this, and if they have any comments or concerns, they can reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram, and we'd be gladly to help. Again, our next episode will continue on with this course that we're talking. We'll have Brenda back in as our guest. Maybe she can talk a little bit more next time.
Yeah, and the holidays are coming up, and the stress of it, and the extra food and drink, and the stress of the holiday season, going into winter, the seasons changing. It can be hard for a lot of people.
Vitamin D.
So there's a lot to talk about next show.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we look forward to your comments and concerns, and we'll broadcast next week again with a different episode on continuing on with the mental health. And anything you want to add, Steph?
It's brain health, Tom.
Sorry. Brain health.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye for now.